Then we go into the more immediately modern period. In the early part of the 19th century, there was a fellow named Captain William Morgan, and he was a Mason. And he did something unprecedented in the history of Masonry. He published a book with all the secrets of Masonry in it. And guess what? He disappeared. Now, a few years later, he left behind a wife and children. And a little bit of odd Masonic history, that widow of his went on to become one of the founder of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith's plural wives. Odd little thing. But anyway, eventually someone confessed on his deathbed, one of the two guys that murdered William Morgan. They said they had basically tied rocks around his feet, taken him out in the middle of a lake and dumped him overboard and drowned him. That caused such a stir that, believe it or not, for many, many years after that, Masonry was being driven from pillar to post. Masonic lodges were closing all over the country. There was actually an anti-Masonic party formed. Like today we might have the Libertarian Party or you know, whatever party as a minor party. There was an anti-Masonic party, and their platform was get rid of Masonry, make it illegal. And this got worse and worse and worse for the Masons. And had not the issue of slavery begun to rise up in the South, and indeed in the North with the abolitionist movement, it might have well driven Masonry completely off the shores of America. But, of course, slavery was more important, and the Civil War came along. And after the Civil War, Masonry enjoyed a new surge in popularity due to Albert Pike. Now, Albert Pike was a guy we're going to speak more of later, but he basically caused Masonry to become popular again. And by the 20th century, Masonry was extremely popular, and virtually anybody who was anybody was, in fact, a Mason, unless they happen to be Catholics. Because, of course, down through the years, Catholics have always been forbidden to be Masons, up until very recently. Okay, that brings us up to the present day. Now, before we go any further, there's a central thing in Masonry that you all have to understand, or else you're going to get confused later, and that is the oaths. Masonry requires its people to swear oaths. Now, this is an old graphic from a monitor, which is a ritual workbook of Masonry from the 19th century. And this illustrates the entered apprentice oath. Now you'll see here, this is the worshipful master. And you can always tell the master of the lodge because he's the guy that gets to wear the hat, okay? Then you have over here, this is the senior deacon who kind of conducts the candidate around. And then you have the candidate. Now you'll notice he's kneeling at an altar. This foot is barefoot, you can't tell, but the other foot has a little sandal on it. He's neither naked nor clothed, barefoot nor shod. He's hoodwinked, and he has a cable tow or rope around his neck. And he's been divested of all metal. And in this condition, he is led to the door of the lodge. Now, what's the problem with these oaths? Well, first of all, there's the whole thing of a pig in the poke. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard that expression, but basically a pig in the poke is when you're asked to buy something and you don't know what it is. Like, say, for example, if I came up to you and I said to you, okay, I got this great car, I want $15,000 for it, but it's locked in the garage and you can't see it. Give me your money. Give me the money and I'll give you the pink slip. Now, how many people would do that? I mean, not very many, you know, unless it was your dad or something that was going to sell you the car. I mean, you'd want to see the car. But yet in Masonry, you are asked to swear an oath and you don't know what that oath is. Now, this master, he comes up to the guy and he says, you're going to swear an oath. It's my pleasant duty to inform you that there is absolutely nothing in this oath that will conflict with your duty to God, your country, your neighbor, or yourself. Having been said this, if you wish to proceed, say I will and repeat after me. Now, first of all, that's a bald-faced lie. There's a lot of stuff in that oath that conflicts with those things. But of course the guy doesn't know it. Now on top of that, this guy is kneeling blindfolded. He doesn't know what's around him. For all he knows, there might be 25 wackos in black robes with daggers waiting to pounce on him or something, because the Masons try and scare the guy. I mean, think kind of like fraternities or initiation ceremonies, you know. They try to get the guy nervous and everything, so he doesn't really know what's going on. So basically he says, okay, I'll go along with it. Now his hands are on the Bible here, you'll notice. They're resting on the Holy Bible, square and compass. And in this position, he gets to take the oath. Now these oaths are doozies, and I'm not going to bore you because the shortest oath takes about 5 minutes to recite. So instead I'll just give you the best part. Okay? These are some examples. Now say, for example, you were taking the entered apprentice oath. The end of that oath, and I'm going to recite this word for word, you say, all this I most solemnly and sincerely promise and swear, with a firm and steadfast purpose to keep and perform the same, binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by its roots and buried in the sands of the sea, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours, should I ever knowingly violate my entered apprentice obligation, so help me God, and keep me steadfast in a due performance of the same. Now, think of that. So help me God. And then the worshipful master says, in token of your sincerity, kiss the book which is before you, which is the Holy Bible. You've sworn an oath that you'll have your throat cut, your tongue torn out by its roots, and then you swear it by saying, so help me God, and you kiss the Bible. Now that would stand up in any court of law, wouldn't it? Then the second degree oath. You swear that you will have your heart plucked out of your body and placed on the highest pinnacle of the temple, there to be devoured by the vultures of the air. That's usually fatal, wouldn't you say? Then you have the third degree. The third degree oath, you swear that you would have your body severed in twain, your bowels taken thence and burned to ashes, the ashes scattered to the four winds of heaven, that no more remembrance should be had of so vile a wretch as I should be, to have thus knowingly violated my master mason obligation, so help me God and keep me steadfast, blah, blah, blah. Again, very, very serious. Now, for example, here's an even better one. In the seventh degree of the York Rite, you swear that you would have your skull, the top of your skull, smote off and your brain exposed to the rays of the noonday sun. I tell people, this is your brain on masonry. You know, so, I mean, these are nasty things. Now, can you imagine your pastor swearing these oaths? Can you imagine your husband swearing these oaths? Can you imagine your deacons swearing these oaths? But countless of them do, every single day. This is very common in Christian churches. Okay. Now, then there's the function of the enlightenment. What happens here is you're supposed to be enlightened. And once you've said all this horrible, bloodthirsty oath, the master comes down and he says, my brother, in your current situation, what do you most desire? Okay, now, this is a true story, supposedly. Happened in a Grand Lodge in Milwaukee. It was an initiation that was being done in June. Very hot night. There's this really heavy-set guy, just incredibly overweight. And by the time because you're about 15 minutes into the ceremony by then, and he was sweating and sweating and sweating and sweating, and his blue jammies that they put you in were just soaked with sweat. And he said, when the worship master comes down, he says, my brother, in your present position, what do you most desire? And now the deacon who's standing there, you saw that a moment ago, he's supposed to whisper in your ear, light. But he was kind of hot, and he was his mind was sort of wandering. And so the master says, what do you most desire? And the guy says, a beer. And the deacon just freaks out, you know, and all the lodge goes, you know, like sacrilege or something. And so the deacon bends down and he whispers in the ear, no, light. The guy says, I don't care, a light beer, a dark beer, just give me a beer. So Masons are looking for light, okay? And when you go through the second degree, you ask for more light. And when you go to the third degree, you ask for further light. So here you're going to get light, okay? So the master says to all the Masons, he says, my brethren, stretch forth your hands and assist me in bringing our newfound brother to light. And then what happens is he starts reading from Genesis. And he goes, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and he gets to the place where it says, and God said, let there be light. And everybody claps their hands, and the blindfold is taken off the guy's eyes, and what he sees the three great lights of Masonry, the Holy Bible, square and compasses, illuminated by the three lesser lights, which are three burning tapers. And he's supposed to be enlightened by this awesome sight. Now, it wasn't real enlightening for me, but maybe I was a tough sell. I don't know. But anyway, that's what happens. That's how you get enlightened in Masonry. Now, only once you've gone through this are all the dread secrets of Masonry actually revealed. And you know what those dread secrets are? They're basically secret handshakes and passwords. So we're going to go into that now. By the time you're done, you're going to probably know more about Masonry tonight than most Masons know. In fact, I can guarantee that. Okay. When your ritual training is done, you are taught that there are ways that you can recognize another Mason. And those ways are basically signs, tokens, words, and points of your entrance. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, first of all, let's talk about signs. Signs are various weird cryptic gestures. The only one you're ever going to see out in public is the Grand Masonic Hailing Sign of Distress. But I'm just going to try and do a couple of the other ones just so you get the idea. All of the signs are based in the idea of the way your hands are placed when you take the oath. So, for example, I'm going to right now do the entered apprentice sign. This is the due guard of the sign, because one hand is under the Bible and one hand is over the Bible for the entered apprentice degree. This is the actual sign, and you'll notice it reflects the penalty, that your throat is being cut. Okay, now, the Master Mason degree, this is the due guard, and this is the sign, because your body is severed in twain. Okay? Now, the Grand Masonic Hailing Sign of Distress is a little more complicated, and I need to explain how this works. When you take your third degree oath, you promise that if you ever see a Mason giving the Grand Masonic Hailing Sign of Distress, or hear the words that are part of that sign spoken, you must fly to the aid of that Mason if there is a greater likelihood of your saving his life than of you losing your own. Okay? And this actually can be very serious sometimes, because there are reported cases like, say, for instance, in World War I, a German U-boat commander has serviced and was about to fire upon a United States frigate. But he looked through the periscope and he saw the captain on deck giving the Grand Masonic Hailing Sign of Distress, and so he didn't fire upon the ship. There are many, many stories told, usually from World War II, of where American and German soldiers would be on a face down, and they were both Masons, and one or the other would give the Grand Masonic Hailing Sign of Distress, and they wouldn't shoot one another because they were brother Masons. And that brotherhood, notice this, transcends national loyalty. It transcends the oath you take as a soldier in the United States Army. Stuff like this. Kind of interesting. So anyhow, here's what happens with the Grand Masonic Hailing Sign of Distress. You start out like this. Okay? Now let's say I was a Mason, and I was walking down a dark alley and I was being mugged by a crazed midget. Okay? Now this is the sign that I would give. Now, handily enough, this looks just like what you would do if you were being held up, right? But actually this is much older. I mean, this isn't just since the 19th century. You start out like this, and then gradually you bring your hands down into this position. And then finally, your hands end up basically in the same gesture as you would be making if you were doing the sign of a Master Mason. Now, but this all kind of flows together, and I'm going to try and do it for you as well as I can. There are also words that go with this, okay? And here's how it goes. You go, "O Lord, my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" So, "O Lord, my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" And if you were a Mason and you heard those words spoken, like in a dark alley or when you were out walking at night or something, you would be obligated by an oath to go and help that guy. What's interesting, another little bit of Masonic history, is that Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church, was a Mason. And when he was being shot by a mob in Carthage jail in Carthage, Illinois,